Most business owners raise their prices and immediately scare off buyers, not because the price is too high, but because they don't know how to make those prices feel worth it to customers and clients. But the truth is, buyers rarely decide whether or not to buy based on pure mathematics. They buy based on the story that your price tells about your brand and products. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 ways to raise your prices so you not only keep your current buyers, you actually attract better ones, the kind who see higher price as proof that they're in the right place and they need to buy from you. Now, if we haven't met yet, I'm Jen Kleinhens, marketing coach, consultant, and founder of Choice Hacking. For 15 plus years, I've helped my clients add more than $250 million in sales using buyer psychology, from solo coaches and consultants all the way up to Fortune 500 brands like McDonald's, T-Mobile, Microsoft, Starbucks, AT&T, and a whole bunch more. And what I'm going to show you today is going to give you the same secret sauce that my clients pay thousands for, all for free. So let's get into it. Most people think that buyers decide if a price is worth paying based on logical thinking and math. But in reality, pricing is about 95% psychology and only about 5% math. And your buyer decides if you're cheap or expensive before they even see your prices. Now, we all like to believe that we know a fair price when we see it, but actually, research says that we don't. It's down to a psychological principle called a rational value assessment. And it says that we really don't know what something is supposed to cost in isolation. Instead, we infer or guess based on context clues and the environment surrounding the price. For example, if you walk into Louis Vuitton, we expect high prices because that's how they've designed their luxurious store environment. If we walk into a Costco, on the other hand, we look around and say to ourselves, this place isn't wasting money on anything. So we expect low prices. It's really just how our brains work. And if you understand some of these context clues and patterns that our brains are subconsciously searching for, like the ones I'm going to show you today, then you can raise your prices without scaring people off. Here's 3 examples of how these context clues show up in the real world and affect how much people think something is worth. First, price can actually change how we judge if a product is good or bad quality. A bottle of wine priced at $100, for example, will taste better than one priced at $12, even if they're the same exact wine. That's because we have a mental shortcut that says the more expensive something is, the higher quality it must be. This is called the price-quality effect. Second, we think of money differently depending on how it's presented to us. So for example, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, 2 very famous behavioral science researchers, wanted to study how and why we spend. So they ran a little experiment. They told some people to imagine they were about to buy a calculator for $15. The shoppers were then told by the salesperson that that same $15 calculator was only $10 at a store 20 minutes away. Almost 70% of these people said that they would make that 20-minute drive to save $5. Then another group of people was asked to imagine that they were going to buy a $125 calculator. The salesperson then told them that that $125 calculator was $5 cheaper at a store 20 minutes away. This time, instead of 70% of people, only 29% of people said they would take that 20-minute drive to save $5. It's the same drive, it's the same amount of savings. Mathematically, it really makes no sense. $5 is $5 no matter what total price you're paying. But our brains don't always make decisions based on math. A lot of times they just do what feels better. $5 off a $15 calculator feels bigger than saving $5 off a $125 calculator, even though it's the same amount of savings. So we're just willing to do more to get it. This type of behavior is called mental accounting. And third, the context in which we see a price makes a huge difference to how expensive or cheap we think it is. So for example, a $25,000 consulting project can feel like a great deal if it's next to a $150,000 consulting project. If you put that same $25,000 project next to a $2,000 project, now it feels really expensive. That's the anchoring effect, which says the first number we see affects how we perceive the numbers around it. The point is, value in the right price isn't really in the product, it's in the buyer's mind. Your job isn't to justify your price, it's to create the conditions where your price feels right. So how do you design for that feeling? Well, that's what I'm going to show you next using the same framework I teach my Choice Hacking Pro community members and one-on-one coaching clients to build pricing that feels premium and builds trust. Okay, so earlier we talked about how buyers don't judge price with logic, they sort of feel their way into a decision. And here's where most business owners lose sales. They let that feeling happen by accident. Now, if you want to raise your prices without scaring off the right people, you just need to design how your price feels. That's what the pricing pyramid is for. It's a really simple psychology-based framework I created and share with my clients to help them design our prices with intention, based off the subconscious psychological signals that our buyers' brains are searching for. Now, there's 3 layers to this pyramid: context, comparison, and meaning. So let's start at the bottom with context. So context, like we said earlier, is everything that surrounds your price. Your visuals, your copy, your testimonials, your delivery. It sets the emotional stage before your buyer ever sees a number, and it primes them to expect a certain price point. So here's a simple example. Imagine you walk into a restaurant with marble floors and gold-plated silverware, crystal glasses, and a maitre d' and a tux. People around you are dressed in beautiful, expensive formal wear like they're going to the opera. Everything about this environment says this meal is going to be expensive. But then you open the menu, and every single dish costs less than $10. Now, logically, that might sound like a great deal, but emotionally, you probably wouldn't trust the food because the price of the food doesn't match the context for your expectations of what you thought the price was going to be. And that mismatch creates doubt and suspicion. It's because context sets the stage for price. And once that stage is set, the next thing your buyer does is compare your price to other psychological anchors. That's why the second layer of the pyramid is comparison. People never judge a price in a vacuum. They compare it to whatever they see around it, and especially the numbers that they saw first. That's why anchoring is one of the most powerful pricing psychology principles. If your lowest tier price is the first number someone sees, everything else feels too expensive. But if you start with your highest tier offer, that number suddenly sets an anchor. It makes everything else feel more affordable in comparison. Here's a real-world example. So there's a department store called TJ Maxx where they sell designer clothes at discount prices. If you happen to live in the UK, by the way, it's called TK Maxx, but it's the same store. Now, if you've ever shopped at TJ Maxx, you'll notice that their price tags always have a price that shows what an item supposedly sells for in a designer store. That compare at price isn't just there to make you feel good about shopping at TJ Maxx. It serves as a psychological anchor to make whatever the TJ Maxx price is feel like a great deal in comparison. Whereas you might have walked into TJ Maxx and seen a sweater that was $15 and said, I don't know if this sweater is worth $15 to me. Once you see that anchor price of $45, all of a sudden $15 sounds like an amazing deal. Now you're much more likely to put that sweater in your cart and buy it because you got a crazy deal, or at least you feel like you did. Now, in your business, that anchor might be a high-priced offer like personalized consulting project or bespoke training session, or an item of clothing made out of high-quality materials like cashmere or leather, or even access to an exclusive event or conference like TED that's invite only and you have to apply to attend. That higher-priced product reframes how your buyer sees the rest of your offers. Now, I do want to give a word of warning here, because what some, we'll call them unscrupulous, coaches and consultants do is they put an insanely priced offer or product that they never expect to sell next to their core offer to make it seem like a really great deal. Now, this is unethical. If you're going to use anchoring, make sure what you're offering is actually worth the amount that you're charging. In the TJ Maxx example, the company was actually sued by people who claimed that the anchor price was just kind of made up out of thin air. And we don't want to do that. Instead, we want the anchor price product to be something that we actually offer and that can provide value for our customers and clients, not a fake door that we never expect anyone to open. But anchoring doesn't work on its own because buyers don't just ask, what does this cost? They're also subconsciously asking things like, how meaningful is this offer or product to me? Will it make a difference in my day-to-day life? Will it help me solve a problem or achieve a goal? That's why the top of the pricing pyramid is the most important part to get right when it comes to pricing, and it has nothing to do with numbers. This is where your price stops being about money and starts being about meaning. Your buyer is asking, how meaningful is this offer or product to me? Not in a general sense, but in a deeply personal, this solves a problem I care about way. And if your offer doesn't connect to something that they value, no price is going to feel right. But if you can tap into what matters most to them, if your offer feels meaningful on a personal level, then price stops being a barrier and instead becomes a psychological green light. That's why meaning is at the top of the pricing pyramid because it's the deciding factor on whether your offer gets snapped up or ignored. So here's a quick example of meaning at work. For years, plastic-based faux leather was called pleather. It sounded cheap, synthetic, and disposable. Even people who bought it didn't really feel that great about it. I mean, it's plastic leather. Then some genius lost to history, renamed it as vegan leather. It was the same material, the same product, but suddenly it spoke to people's values, sustainability, ethics, identity. That tiny shift in the name made the same product feel more meaningful and valuable, even desirable. When you align what your offer does with what your buyer cares about, you don't need to fight for attention. You don't need to over-explain the price because the value is already obvious. And if you want to figure out if your price is attracting more clients or driving them away, I've got a free resource that you're going to love called the Perfect Price Checklist. It's a quick, practical guide to figure out how to price perfectly using psychology, not math, all in under 5 minutes. You can get it for free at perfectpricechecklist.com or at the link in the description below. Now, when all three of these elements are working together, the context, the comparisons, and the meaning, your price doesn't just make sense, it sort of feels inevitable. But as simple as this framework is, none of it's going to work until you change the way that you think about price. Here's what I mean. Most consultants, coaches, and service providers think of their offer as something their buyers must have. But in reality, your buyer sees you as a nice to have. And that mismatch is what blocks a lot of sales. So think about it this way. Toothpaste is a must have. Everyone buys it, nobody questions it, and most of us grab whatever's cheapest or most familiar. Now think about a Ferrari. Absolute luxury. Nobody needs one. But when someone wants one, they'll pay nearly anything to get it. Not because they want to get from A to B, but because of what it means to them to own one. Now, if you want to raise your prices, you have to stop thinking about yourself like toothpaste, consciously or not, and start thinking about yourself like a Ferrari. That means you barely go on sale, if ever. You don't offer endless options. You don't accept every single client that knocks on your door. Instead, you offer something exclusive and transformative and based off of years of professional experience and insight. Frame your work as a premium experience that's only available for certain types of buyers, not in an egotistical or discriminatory or a self-important way, but because your approach just isn't for everyone. Show that you're choosing your clients and your availability is limited, not the other way around. Because high-value buyers, I call these big fish buyers, by the way, they're not going to chase toothpaste. They're going to chase something that can change their lives or their business. And when your offer feels like a luxury, when it taps into identity and aspiration and trust and meaning, people just want it more, and they're willing to pay more to get it. So if you started this video worried that raising your prices would drive people away, now you know what most business owners don't, that pricing is 95% psychology and only about 5% math. And when the psychology is right, the right buyers feel more attracted to your offers, not less. So now you've got the tools, the psychological pricing pyramid, and a mindset shift that helps you position yourself like the premium experienced expert that you are. But if you want to go even deeper and see how pricing fits into the bigger picture of marketing that turns strangers into followers, believers, buyers, and repeat buyers, watch this video where I'll walk you through the choice hacking model. It's the same system I use with my clients to double their marketing effectiveness so sales and profit can double too.